Thank you guys for making the time today. Thank you to everybody who is logging in at the moment. We started doing these around 4 weeks ago as a way to bring together the brand and nonprofit communities to figure out ways in which we could collaborate to help fight COVID-19 as well. Today we've got a great session for you. We're going to kick off with Jonathan and Neil from 21st Century Brand. They work with folks like Pinterest, Mars, Headspace, Uber, and more. To talk about their recent report on marketing through crisis, which is super interesting. Meredith is going to talk to us about Gen Z. Do Something is an incredible social impact consultancy who have a depth of knowledge on young people and purpose. And they've got some really interesting nuggets to share from Gen Z's response to the pandemic. And then Peter from IEG, who are the leader in sponsorship insights and intelligence, is joining us to share some findings from the IEG Outlook, future of the sponsorship industry. I know we have a lot of people from the sponsorship industry joining us today as well. Welcome to everybody. The format is we're going to have a series of 15-minute conversations right throughout. If you'd like to send us questions, use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen there. Bobby will be collating all the responses, and then the final 15 minutes we'll set aside to do like a roundtable Q&A so we can answer your questions. So keep them coming in right throughout as well. All of this will be recorded and sent out to everybody on the webinar directly afterwards. We will also share a Dropbox link with all three of these presentations so you can have them for future reference as well. All right, so let's kick off. Jonathan and Neil, I've been tracking the work that you guys have been doing for 21st Century Brand. You do remarkable work. Jonathan, can you just talk a little bit about how the idea for 21st Century Brand came about and what your kind of purpose and philosophy is?
Yeah, we, Neil and I set up 21st Century Brand after working together for 4 years at Airbnb. I was the CMO at Airbnb and Neil was Chief Strategy Officer for Chiat in LA. And Neil and I basically built the strategy and then the brand all around the world. And we realized that there were other companies of Airbnb's ilk that also were interested in building a classic marketing discipline and a classic approach to brand building. And so we set up the company, and we were very lucky in our first year because we were approached by Peloton and Pinterest and Uber Eats, Headspace, lots of clients that were born in this millennia that were actually looking to build purpose-driven brands. And our company works with founders and CEOs to really help them unlock the potential of their brand as far as cultural impact is concerned, not just the basic business plan. And it's been really interesting over the last couple of months because the paradigms of brand building have really been turned upside down, and we'll share a little bit about that as we get into our marketing through crisis white paper.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that context. Neil, first of all, how are things in London? What's the mood there as well? I feel like the BBC. Hello, London. Come in, London. Yeah. How is London?
I'm going to speak for 15 million Londoners. Yeah, it's. I think like I'm grateful to be in London right now. No disrespect to the States, but I think that the kind of people have pulled together quite a bit. And actually, I sense in loads, and I hear it from lots of people, like local communities are pulling together, all the WhatsApp groups, people are going to food banks more. There's obviously a lot of people being really impacted, but I feel after Brexit, I'm hopeful that in a weird way, it's kind of helping heal some of the polarization of Brexit, while also putting a lot of pressure on people. But I do feel like a sense of togetherness now that everyone's stopped talking about it as well, which is great. And it's now more figuring out something real versus something conceptual about how can they help out, how can they save their own careers, how can they help out their neighborhoods, you know? So I actually think from London, I think we're fighting through.
Good. Well, let's jump in. You guys have done some fascinating work looking at what's going on with brands out there. And you have some great principles and advice on how brands should operate in this space. Just go right ahead, Neil, whenever you're ready to start sharing. Let's walk through it, and then we'll have a quick conversation at the end of it as well.
All right, great. I'll just...
Yeah, so for everybody who's joining, what Neil's going to share is just a real top line from a white paper that we distributed on different social media platforms. You can find it on LinkedIn, you can find it on Twitter. And we wrote this for our clients and for the VCs that are investing in our clients' business. And it was just as the pandemic started to hit, there was a kind of crisis of identity for a lot of brands. Should we divest from marketing? Should we lean into marketing? Should we lean into community action? And so we just wanted to be generous with our own thoughtware and issue a point of view. And I'm very proud to say that it's been embraced by organizations like Adweek, who have set up an initiative for brands to actually come together and partner in a very significant and interesting way, because actually through brand partnerships, brands can make an even bigger difference than acting on their own. And so this is just a distillation of some of the thinking. As ever, 21st Century Brand, we don't shy away from celebrating the very best, but also the very worst of brand action. So as Neil takes you through some of the principles, we'll also end with just highlighting a couple of brands that we think are doing really, really well, and a brand that actually should work a little harder.
All right, great. So I think, the first thing was like, it became clear pretty quickly that this is like a defining moment for all of us. Like everyone who's on this call, like in the brand, it's a defining moment for many communities, including brand and marketing folks, and it's a moment for us and for the brands that we devote a lot of our time to building, probably too much time for a lot of you. And so, because clearly this generation has never been through a kind of collective trauma like this. It's a different thing. Different people are being impacted in different ways, but everyone is being impacted by it in some way. And marketing was already really complicated. It's already so much to balance, and now we're trying to learn a new playbook in real time without a roadmap. So really, we're just trying to look at what's happening to people's needs. What do people need right now? How they're changing? What should brands? What does that mean for how brands should kind of behave and act? And who can we learn from? Those are the three things. I'm just going to give you some headlines. I think one of the reasons, going back to it being a defining moment, was, there's a lot of talk around purpose, and this really is the time when people need brands to actually step up. This is a good statistic in a way that, almost 2/3 of us think that their country won't make it through the crisis without brands playing a critical role in the fight. So that's like showing there is a genuine need there. Equally, most people don't trust brands. Only a third, these are both recent stats from Edelman, but they don't trust most of the brands they buy. So it's kind of quite a poignant moment. People really want to believe in brands and what we've got to offer, but most people kind of don't trust us either. And so it's kind of important what we do, that we really are thoughtful and think critically about what's really going to make a difference, against what's kind of more like sort of just looking for creative opportunities or doing things which are slightly gimmicky and self-serving. So it's kind of help with that. 6 principles to kind of follow. I think the first is obvious, but it's important. Empathy. People are tense right now. So much work. There's been great work done by Simpler, by Kodak, by the nursery, various research groups. People are really stressed right now. There's a lot of relationships under pressure, and they have different needs. So we've got to be very empathetic to that. Secondly, generosity is a huge thing. We like it. We want brands to be mobilizing their assets and communities to help those who most need it and avoid expensive endorsements at the same time. And I think there's been some great examples of that, whether that's like Spotify, making it much easier for people to give to artists, for example, and giving a call to arms there. Third, I think utility and agility, like only doing things that add genuine value and constantly assessing what constitutes value, because, what was meaningful at the start of this thing maybe table stakes or even counterproductive today in terms of thinking critically about how can you really help, which is an important thing to embrace. Fourth, I think we're looking for acts, not ads. We obviously have to advertise as well, but I think well-meaning messages aren't really what's needed right now. Make a meaningful contribution, document the story, and you'll kind of get the eyeballs if it's worth talking about. So really thinking about it that way, and we've seen a lot of examples of people doing that. There's been some great things happening. Fifth, I think hands-on leadership. We want to see our leaders, we want to see our founders, we want to see our CEOs, we want to see our CMOs making a difference and not just marshalling their resources, but actually getting actively involved. And you've seen a lot of that, which has been, well, a bit of that which is good. And we'll talk about that in a bit, some of the examples. And then finally, you know, it's still about brands. You still trying to build equity, so you do it your way. You know, run your initiatives through the lens of your purpose and personality. So you're still adding long-term value. You know, we are businesses. You have to make money. We have to drive preference still. So do it in a way which reinforces what you're best at, what you're good at. And I think we've seen some good examples of brands doing that. So that's 6 principles, and we go much deeper into them in the white paper, which we can follow up with anyone afterwards who wants to hear about them. I think one overall thing that's, you know, it's an interesting thing. This is really cheesy animation. I'm not going to stay away from that because it helps make the point. Invert the hierarchy of needs. You know, traditionally, we're kind of encouraged to go right to the top of the pyramids with our brands and really stand for very aspirational things and kind of stay away from the more functional bottom ends because they're more sort of hygiene factors. And I think that wisdom's been kind of turned on its head because these needs are so acute now. Jonathan, I'm going to let you rant a bit about this now.
Yeah, and I'm conscious of the time, so we've only got another 3 minutes, so we'll just headline this. You know, for a lot of brand builders out there, what you're trying to do is find a quick way of having your brand get as close to the top of the whether you're a hair care brand, whether you're a cosmetics brand, or whether you're a fashion brand. Moving into self-esteem and self-actualization is established thinking. That's where all brands and great brands aspire to be. But actually, probably for the next 18 months, people aren't looking for brands to do anything other than reassure them of their physiological and psychological needs. And the highest place that a brand should potentially aim for is to create this sense of community, this sense of love and belonging. And it's going to be really interesting in this place next year, but looking at those kind of marquee marketing moments where the majority of activity is in self-actualization, self-esteem, that's just not going to be appropriate for the next 18 months. So pull it back and really, really focus on actually just making sure that you're helping people address some of these more near-term needs that they have for themselves, their families, and their local communities. Neil, we only have another 2 minutes.
It's all right. Take your time, guys. Keep going. Keep going.
All right, good. Thank you.
All right, cool. So that's a big thing, remapping those needs and then thinking about how you can play a meaningful role in addressing them because it needs, you know, critical thinking. And I think some brands who have really thought about it, you know, these are just some good examples for us. So first, you know, Unilever, going to the point about really servicing what the kind of physiological belonging needs, safety needs. One of the first things they did out of the gate was change their supplier terms and payment terms and reduce them. That's a huge act, which shows amazing empathy with their community. Brands talk a lot about their communities. That's genuinely helping people who need it. You know, and then they've also done obviously really creative things. They've continued the work they've been doing on hand washing, which is like 100 years for them. They're doing it in a very ambitious global way, working with the UK government. Lifebuoy been doing some cool things, promoting other brands as well. So that's a brand that's really thought critically and doing a through the line kind of purpose-driven contribution here. Another brand, and we know well, Headspace. You know, really stood up and delivered, and have moved very quickly to kind of realize that they could really help provide essential services. They're normally quite a premium service. Suddenly you had Headspace partnering with the NHS in the UK to make sure that every health worker had access to all Headspace services, partnering with Cuomo in New York, partnering with Michigan, and suddenly making their services available to lots of people who need it. And you know, as a brand, it's an act of generosity, but it's also a very important moment for them. They're kind of finding their moment, they're finding their time, and it will, you know, there will be a long-term benefit from them. But it's all still very much on what they can deliver. So they're another great example. And then a final one, Pinterest, who are a brand we know very well, and they're all about inspiration. They're the world's inspiration company, and they moved very quickly to launch a new Inspiration Today tab, knowing that people were suddenly turning to Pinterest more and more, and providing useful inspiration for every day. So whether it's coronavirus advice from experts or inspiring home spaces. And so that was very much through the lens of what they're about, but making it very timely and relevant now. And then equally, it was interesting to also see, like talking about leaders stepping up, their CEO, Ben Silverman, actually then worked with a group of scientists to launch a new self-tracking app. which can provide data to all US medical authorities which can help them track COVID and monitor the symptoms. So if anyone's on this call who's in the States, download it and use it. And it's a great example of not only was he doing that, but he's actually leading from the front in terms of doing a pretty amazing side hustle. So we're very proud of them and what they did. And then, yeah, so finally, I think a brand that perhaps didn't get it right out of the gates was Coca-Cola, I think. You know, one of the immediate things was the logo distancing, which a lot of brands have chosen to do. And I think, you know, there's good things about that. There's also debatable things about that. It's whether it's serving a purpose, but I think maybe it was confusing putting it in Times Square, a messaging about social distancing, which is one of the busiest places in the world. And they paused marketing in the UK after that as well. So it didn't feel as kind of a confident, thought through response in the way that some of the other three that we've talked about, really thinking critically about what's needed and how still to build their brands at this time. So I think that they're maybe not an example to learn from on this occasion. And then just to finish off, really, you know, the coolest thing, you know, we always want to be cool in culture with brands. The coolest thing any brand can do right now is be helpful. Put your hand up, do something, and that will if it's thought through and inventive, it'll play you right. So that's really our kind of final message, which is pretty simple.
I'd like all listeners to just think, just ask themselves this question. You know, we know that businesses are under pressure to navigate this in a financially responsible way. But rather than as a marketer, somebody who's steering a brand, go, how can I sell right now? Ask yourself the question, how can you help? And if you help in a very authentic and tangible way, then you're going to sell. And the best brands that will be held up as real emblems of steering this global psychological pandemic that we're all facing with are the ones that really, really understood the commercial benefit of being helpful. Thank you.